Not giving up. We're also going to be talking about what to do when you are struggling with feeling stuck slash stagnant in trying to move forward with publication. And I know that a lot of you probably are not looking towards publication right now because a lot of teen authors are not looking towards publication, but some of you are looking at short story contests that could get you published, contests that could get you published, and even trying to finish your novel to get published. So even if you haven't gotten to that point yet, I think it's important to talk about this because a lot of people are like, I finished my novel, I did the hard part, now I'm done, and it's like, oh no. Unfortunately, querying and trying to find someone to work with you, and if you go the self-publishing route, are also equally as hard. However, I wanted to talk about the fact that, and kind of normalize rejection, which I know no one wants to normalize rejection because it's a big, fat, sucky, scary word. But I think it's important to normalize rejection. Honestly, most famous authors have experienced rejection. One of my favorite stories is Stephen King. One of his very first stories. Dang it, I should have probably looked up what it was called. But it's one of the very first ones that he ever published, and it's one of his more famous ones as well. It got turned into a movie and all sorts of things. He experienced so much rejection from that one that he almost considered self-publishing. That tells you, because he was like stubbornly wanted to do it, and he was like, maybe. And back then, self-publishing was way harder than it is nowadays. Like, nowadays, it's like, considering self-publishing, good for you, cool. Back then, it was like, scary. It was a little bit more touch and go there. He said that he had a nail on the wall that he would put all of his rejections on, and that he ran out of space. Which also tells you there were so many rejections. There had to be at least 100 because it was a long nail. It was at least 2 inches long. That's a lot of paper. Another one of my favorites is Jessica Day George. She actually had a moment where she was talking about her book and doing a little presentation about her book at a writing conference, and one of the publishers came up and said, hey, why didn't you ever query to us about your novel? And she said, I did. You rejected me. And they kind of had a moment of like, oh. Because they were sitting here going like, we totally would have accepted it. And it's like, you didn't. So sometimes even people who think they do want your stuff say no for whatever stupid reason. And then later they're like, I regret that. But at the time they think they're in the right. Jennifer A. Nielsen also mentioned the fact that she has a 2-inch binder full of all of her rejections. And she is now a New York Times bestseller. So kind of hard to argue with that. One of my other favorites is Ray Bradbury. He actually had a filing cabinet full of rejections. Mainly because he also did short story contests, like you guys probably are going to do short story contests, magazine contests. That's why I felt like, hey, Ray Bradbury might be a little more relatable. Because yes, he published novels, but he did that later in life. He primarily did short stories. And so he was just sending out short story after short story after short story, and well, that's how you get a filing cabinet full of rejection letters, is you keep trying and you keep getting rejected. And yet he is considered such a classic author that almost no one has not heard of him because your English teachers are like, dude, read his books. Which generally says that you're good because history hasn't forgotten you even long after you've finished. Yeah. All right, the next thing that I want to talk about, oh, there it is. I was like, do we not have an eraser today? I couldn't see it there for a second.
Maybe we actually have two because we're on this side too.
Oh, cool. All right, next thing I want to talk about is comparison. And the reason we're talking about comparison when it comes to not giving up is because a lot of people, I don't know, I have a marker on my shirt now. Scary. I'm dying. All right. So, when it comes to comparison, a lot of people like to be like, oh, I will never be as great as fill in the blank. And but like everyone has their set where they're just like, oh, but so-and-so. And it's like, okay, but you're not so-and-so. Who's to say that you won't be your own version of greatness, A? And B, don't compare yourself to people who have literally had multiple editors, emphasis on multiple. Most people have one main editor and at least two backup editors that look over it a second and a third time in case the first editor missed anything. And then they also have professional marketers, professional producers, professional cover designers, all of this stuff. And yet we're still saying that we're not as good as them? Well, of course we're not. They had literally so much help. There's no way you can compare to someone who literally had a whole team of people helping them to not be bad. Your stuff is automatically going to look inferior because you didn't have 3 editors looking over it. You didn't have a professional book designer. And so of course it's going to look a little bit rougher. Like, that's just bound to happen. I mean, heck, one of my favorite examples of this is when I was listening to Writing Excuses. I know I've mentioned this before, but it just bears repeating. Brandon Sanderson's main editor was like, oh yeah, I cut out 2/3 of his novel before I even send it to the next editor. And it's like, okay, so even the person who were like, hey, you're an amazing writer, is literally having 2/3 of his stuff cut because it's junk.
And like, especially Brandon Sanderson, he's like legendary for his massive books.
Exactly.
And that's like 3
3
times
times
big.
thicker. Like, oh man, that guy just likes to tell you all of the information, and his editor's like, dude, you only need a little bit of this. So honestly, it's something that we need to that I feel that especially as young authors need to be careful of. Don't compare too hard. Is it worth it to be like, oh, I really like that scene and trying to emulate that scene? Yes. But what's healthy is emulating. What's not healthy is saying, I can never be like them, so I give up. Don't give up just because they have amazing work. They have amazing work because they also had a lot of people help them. And you don't have as much help and as much resources
And
right now.
chances are, with like Brandon Sanderson or Scott Card, they're like twice or like 5 times my age.
Right, and so
keep that in
practice.
mind.
Practice at minimum. Even at their regular writing, they have more practice than you, and then they have a team on top of it. Exactly. Illustrated my point beautifully. So comparison is not what you want to be doing. Emulating, thinking, hey, this is cool, how can I do something similar? Absolutely. That's how we learn how to be a better writer. But there's a difference between how can I be like this person and I will never be. Because that's absolutely not true. You can be the best author you can be. And that's part of the reason why I became a freelance editor, was because I was kind of tired of having to tell authors, I'm sorry, you just barely didn't make the cut. Even when I wanted to say yes. And so I was like, you know what? I'm tired of this. As long as you're paying me to edit your novel, I'm not going to say no. Your novel is worth my time. And I believe that's absolutely true. With enough editing, any novel can become a fantastic novel. Because all novels struggle in the beginning. All novels need editing. All novels need a professional cover designer in order to have the success that they want. It's not about, and even then, it's not about you needing that necessarily. It's about the fact that everyone needs that. All right. Next thing that I actually wanted to talk about was something that I thought was very interesting. But I've seen several articles on it, and I actually, as a freelancer, have seen this myself. As a freelance editor, I have seen a plethora of increase in self-publishing. Why is that? A, because it's easier now than it ever has been before, which, yay, good things. But also, the reason querying has gotten harder is because more people want to be writers, which is good, yay. More novels, more reading, yay, excellent. But also, as a result of that, querying has become harder too because the budgets have become limited on how many they can accept. And so even if your book is phenomenal, if there's 3 books that are slightly more phenomenal than yours by like 2 points, they're going to be accepted and yours isn't. Even if you came really close. I know I was told this story before, but that was one of the things that got me about editing professionally, was there was this book that I absolutely loved and adored, but ultimately when the group all put in like, hey, which one do we think should win, it came to be like, I think it was, we like ordered them all in what order we thought it should be in, and then averaged out the order, and it came out to be 5th, and we were only accepting 4. And I was like, but it's so good. And so it was like, I honestly think they should have accepted that one, personally. But then again, that's why we have multiple opinions. But long story short, querying has gotten a lot harder because the budget is smaller and therefore they have to accept less books and books that they think guarantee sales. Which unfortunately means that if you are off trend, you're more likely to get rejected even if you have a fantastically well-written novel. Purely because with querying, it's not just about how good your story is, it's not just about the timing, it's not just about how well you write a query letter, it's also a little bit about luck. It's about, hey, this agent just so happened to run into this editor who just so happened to ask for a book that happens to look exactly like yours. That's luck, unfortunately, and querying is involving a lot more luck and a lot less skill. Does that mean that skill won't get you there? Absolutely not. You do need base skills and base good things for your query letter and for your first chapter in order to get through. But ultimately, after you've set up that good foundation of having a fantastic query letter and of having a fantastic premise and having a fantastic novel, then comes the hard part of pushing past and getting a little lucky. But yeah, so I just wanted to let you guys know, if you guys have a harder time with querying, please know it might not even be you. It's also the environment that we live in today is just accepting less books and having more issues accepting authors in because of their budgeting and because of needing guaranteed sales, quote unquote. So honestly, it may not be you. It may just be the environment. Alright. Next thing. Now, when I say other options, I am not saying give up. I am saying persevere in spite of other people telling you no. They say no and you say, suck it, I'm going to do it anyway. This is where self-publishing comes into play. And a lot of people say, oh, well, self-publishing isn't as good as traditional. That is a lie, first off. The reason that self-publishing gets a bad rap is because a lot of people think that you don't need an editor, you don't need a cover designer, you don't need all these things. But that's not true. And a lot of well-done self-published authors know that that's not true. With your other options, though, it does mean that you're going to be taking on a lot more responsibility. You're going to be taking on the monetary responsibility of finding an editor, finding a book cover designer. You're going to be taking on the monetary responsibility of marketing for yourself and the time commitment of marketing for yourself. And in today's day and age, funny story, in some ways the other option is becoming more appealing. Why? Because a lot of publishing companies are actually encouraging you to have an audience before you query. Which sounds wild, but the main reason is that all the publishing companies got together, they had a discussion, probably not all of them, but a lot of them, and they all said, hey, what can we do to eliminate more people? And they said, well, those of them that are super good, we can just market for them, but those of them that we think are good but just have potential, what if we force them to market? Say, hey, you don't have a high enough audience, we don't think there's interest. And so in today's age of social media, a lot of people are saying, hey, you can advertise for free yourself. So just do it. And so I will say, if you're getting rejection letters, it might be time to start marketing your book yourself, purely because then when you start marketing it and you're like, hey, I have 5,000 followers who disagree with you, then all of a sudden they're like, maybe we should reconsider. It gives you a little bit more leverage to change their minds. Make them go, I don't know about that. Maybe we should. On top of that, the benefit of having other publishing options is the fact that then you are in complete control. Unlike other times where sometimes you're not in control. A great example of this is, funnily enough, the Wizard of Oz series, which sounds weird because everyone generally only knows about the movies, but it was a series of books. There was about 6, I want to say. But the funniest part, sorry, I keep adjusting the camera because I can't really see myself very well. I keep cutting off my face. With other options, I honestly think that the guy who wrote Wizard of Oz would have preferred to self-publish if he had been born in this day and age. And the reason why is because he wanted to focus on the land of Oz, wanted to focus on adventures in Oz, wanted to focus on other characters and other people. And his publishing company wrote in his contract, you have to include Dorothy in every single book.
Oh, dang.
And he went, I don't like Dorothy. She was actually just a way to introduce the world. I don't want to keep her around. And so you can tell he gets increasingly more upset throughout the series because he'll be like, and Dorothy showed up for the last 2 minutes because I have to. And so other options are not necessarily bad. Do they cost more money and time? Absolutely, 100%. Are they harder to get yourself established and out there because people generally are more touch and go with self-publishing? Also true. But that doesn't mean it's not possible, especially if you're a romance author. For some reason, romance and self-publishing go together really well, and like no one judges you for that genre. All other genres are like under suspicion, but romance, they're just like, meh, it doesn't matter how it's published as long as it's romance. So I don't know why that is, but it's a case.
Oh, because people who read romance novels, like, also, like, the chances are they're either just like hopeless romances, or
Also fair, which means they just want something to read.
yeah, or they like want romance in their life, and so like I need romance. Someone give me romance.
Anyone, you there, give it to me. I need a romance novel. But yeah, that's fair.
Romance.
That's a good point. It's a dedicated fandom, and yes, I would say fantasy and science fiction also have dedicated fandoms, but they're a lot more particular.
Just because there's a lot more variety.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I feel like with romance, there's like 2 plot lines,
Mm-hmm.
and that's it.
But yeah, so it's difficult as far as that goes with other genres, but that doesn't mean it can't be done. I have literally watched several of my clients that I've edited go from a couple hundred followers on Instagram to thousands. And those people have all bought their book and read their book. And I'm like, this is amazing. Granted, they're also really great at marketing. So as I said, marketing's hard. But that doesn't mean you can't do it. And especially because the funny thing about marketing is half the time you don't even talk about your book. You just talk about you and your writing process and like your favorite book quotes. People are like, dude, I like you. Let me check out your book. So it's also just about having a good persona. That's the hard thing about doing the other option is because with traditional, you don't really need a persona, you just need a good book. And then the publishing company creates a persona for you. But with self-publishing, you do have to put yourself out there a little bit more, but there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. Just know it's harder. All right.
Especially if you're an introvert like me.
Yeah. Unfortunately, introverts are kind of stuck with the traditional route, just because it is possible to do faceless marketing with Instagram, but it's definitely harder. People prefer to see faces. You have to make much more interesting content to keep people gravitated without a face. The way I phrased that made it sound like you didn't have a face, but I mean without showing your face. All right.
I mean, they don't know. You could just like be completely faceless.
Oh man, see, I almost feel like you'd want to show your face at that point because then everyone would be like, gasp, intrigue. Anyway, all right, so the next thing we're going to talk about, we kind of talked a little bit about earlier, but this is important to reiterate, practice. It is important to not give up because you will forever be getting better. No matter who you are, no matter how old you get, you will forever be getting better. This is another great one with Ray Bradbury. He actually talked about the fact that he has a lot of short stories and even his novels that he published that he looked back on himself. There we go, words. And admitted that he wished he could change them because they weren't as good.
Yeah,
And these are professionally published. Exactly.
There's like so many things I want to change.
And it's like, but it was good. And
We're
he's like,
but it's
what?
fantastic. Shut up.
Exactly. And so just realize that you too are going to always get better with practice and always get better with constructive criticism too. And I do say constructive. Someone who just says, boo, your story's the worst, delete them from the planet of your life. Because you don't deserve that.
No longer in my life.
Don't be in my life. But with constructive criticism, like, hey, I don't quite understand so-and-so's motives. Or, hey, I really don't
know if I fully understand this magic system. That's constructive criticism.
I really just don't like
See, now that's just criticism.
emphasis on constructive.
Exactly. That's why it's saying like, hey, I don't know if I understand this magic system. Can you explain it better? That's constructive. Just saying I don't like your magic system. That's not constructive.
Sounds like a you problem.
Exactly. Some people aren't gonna like your stuff. That's also just I'm sorry. It's going to happen. Like I mean, even with authors, it was so funny. I actually ran across a post the other day where someone was like, anyone else run across this problem? Where they do advanced reader copies. That's where they send it out to a bunch of people after it's been professionally published and professionally produced to get people to say what they like about it. Generally, people sign up for it because they want to read it. They've had people sign up for it and be like, I want an advanced reader copy, and then say, I don't like fantasy, so I hated it. It's like, then why'd you sign up for a fantasy novel? Why? Why'd you sign up to read this if you know you don't like fantasy? But yeah, so that happens too.
Ow.
So know that not everything is going to be constructive criticism. You gotta weed out the people who are just not positive.
And like all my friends.
That doesn't mean
You
that
just need better friends.
That doesn't mean that you don't that doesn't mean you don't just take positive. But what you do is you take, like I said, constructive criticism. Again, that's a whole different thing. Just criticism, like I said, that's generally just it's bad. And then you don't want the alternate side either, where it's just it's good. you want the in between where it's good but.
But what's wrong with it? I know there's something wrong with it. Tell me.
Right, and so it's like that's why you want the person who's willing to say it's great, but this could make it better.
Yeah, right.
That's positive. That's healthy. That's good to move forward. All right, but long story short, constructive criticism is good. Practice is great. Don't ever forget to keep practicing your writing because your skills do sharpen over time and they do get dull with less time. Always make time for writing if it's what's something that matters to you. Don't give up. Anyway.
Which means it's not that important to you.
All right. So next thing we're going to talk about
No joke.
is fan fiction. Which sounds weird, but bear with me. This has to do with practice. A lot of people say, well, it's fan fiction, so that doesn't really count. That's still practice. You're still actively writing words on the page. You're still actively writing a story. And especially if it's true fan fiction, which means it's your idea taking the same characters. Or it's new characters using the same plot line. They're experiencing the same plot from a different point of view. I've seen all sorts of different ones like that, and it's actually quite fascinating. You know, like there was someone who wrote, basically rewrote Harry Potter, but it was from the point of view of a random Slytherin person, and it's like super famous now. That like it's not published professionally, but like it's super famous amongst the fan fiction community because everyone thought it was super well written.
Yeah.
It was basically the plot of Harry Potter, but because it was a unique, their own character, it was seen as new. Anyway. My point is that it still gives you practice. Don't be ashamed to write fan fiction. And lots of famous authors also write fan fiction, or wrote fan fiction. One of my favorite examples of this is Marissa Meyer, who does the Cinder series and now her new superhero series. I can't remember what it's called, but it's good. Renegades, there you go. I was like, it has the fancy cover. That's all I couldn't see the title, just the cover in my brain. But the point is, she actually said she used to write Sailor Moon fan fiction for like a long time. And it's funny too because she said if you know Sailor Moon, you will see Easter eggs in her books of references because she loves it so much. And I'm like, see, this just goes to show you, she practiced her craft doing fan fiction. That's still practice. It still counts. It still got her where she wanted to go. You also can even try writing fan fiction that's unique enough that you could get published. There's a new book called, not as new, it was I think it's 2 years old now, called The Love Hypothesis. And the whole idea is that she basically just said, what if Rey and Kylo Ren from Star Wars lived in our universe and had no powers? They just were normal people. and
just like, I don't like you.
Exactly. And so she created like a similar relationship, a similar dynamic, a similar character structure, and it was technically those two characters, but it was in the modern day. And so as a result, it actually ended up being professionally published because they just changed their names. And it was unique enough that with a name change, most people don't even recognize that it's a Rey and Kylo Ren fan fiction until they are told. And then you look at the front cover and squint real hard and go, oh my gosh. Because the cover artist did a good job of making it look just enough not like them that you could pass, but just enough like them that those who know are like, gasp. My point being that please do not give up on yourselves. You should never give up on the idea of writing. And even if you feel like you don't have time or you're too stressed, don't give up on it if it's something that matters to you. And don't give up on different types of writing too, because you're just as valid of an author if you only ever publish short stories. You're just as valid of an author if you only ever participate in short story contests. You're just as valid of an author if you publish a fan fiction that gets super, super famous for no reason.
Yeah.
Being an author is about continuing to write. It doesn't necessarily matter how much you write. It doesn't necessarily matter if it's fan fiction or not. It doesn't necessarily matter if you traditionally are self-published. What matters is that you are writing and that you are moving forward and that you are proud of where you are coming from.
Yeah.
Even
if
if
being
face rejection.
hopelessly nerdy with no social life, there are two things that take up my time: my friends and writing.
Fair. Being introverted definitely helps.
Yeah.
But I guess my point is, it doesn't matter what type of writer you are, as long as you are proud of where you are. And when I say proud of where you are, I know a lot of people are like, oh, well, I'm not proud of it because it's not super famous. Don't limit yourself to you have to be famous to be proud of yourself. You can still be proud of something that you did and not be famous. There are lots of authors out there that I love their books, and yet I'm 90% sure that no one else does. There's one lady who wrote her first book is called Ian Quicksilver, and it's by Allison Peterson, and she was published by a very small publishing company, and I absolutely love her novels, and I only know 3 other people that know of them, and it's because I told them about her. But does that mean she's a bad author just because she's not ultra famous? No, she's an amazing author. It's just that she's not very well known, and that's not a bad thing. She's still very talented. Again, 50% of getting famous and all those crazy things is luck. And so you can still be a fantastic author and not get lucky enough to be world famous, and that's okay. That doesn't make you any less of an author. You're still a fantastic author. Long story short, please don't give up, because I haven't given up on you, and I will never give up on you. If you email me 20 years from now and are like, hey, Cheyenne, I'm still writing, I will be like, heck yeah. You'll probably need to remind me who you are because I can't see your face, but
It's like, woohoo! You.
I'm like an emoji in the corner, all right? Because most people don't have their faces on their
True.
thingy, so that's the main issue. Is like,
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't know.
I have characters as my profile picture.
See, there you go,
and it's
exactly.
like-
It makes it hard because I'm like, I think I know who's like that fandom, but I'm not sure. But anyway, long story short, please don't give up on yourselves, and know that I won't give up on you. Even one day in the far off future when I leave the library and no longer work here, please know you can always contact me, and that I would be more than happy to encourage you and cheer you on, because I believe it's worth it. Alright. I'm a little sappy, but I mean it. I really care about you guys and writing, and I care about everyone's writing, because I think that everyone's writing journey is valid. All right. Our contest is still open. It is due on May 31st. Sorry?
It's a couple days after my birthday.
Oh, fancy.
Yeah, like a week. Yeah,
So,
exactly.
anyway, yeah, it's due on May 31st. The minimum word count is 1,500 words. The maximum word count is 6,000 words. So big gap. Lots of room to play with. It's a fantasy-themed short story contest with a specific prompt, something strange happening to the main character in a meadow. As long as it is fantasy and involves meadow and a main character, you're good. So there you go. I hope that you encourage. I would encourage you to do that, even if it is over the word count. That doesn't mean you can't edit it down to the word count.
Fair. This one doesn't have like a meadow or anything.
Oh,
so I'm
gotcha.
like, this one doesn't work, but it's so good.
You're like, but it's still good.
Yeah, it's the really
But
sad
anyway,
one.
all right.
So,
I love
I'm going to
it.
stop the video
So
and give you
good.
the opportunity to either talk to me, brainstorm, or work on your own writing. For those of you listening to the video, please feel free to comment below any other ideas you have for writing lessons.